And welcome everybody to this week's live stream coming to you from the Huckabee Theater in Hendersonville, Tennessee, just outside of Nashville. Joining me, as always, Pam Kay, senior producer for the Huckabee Show. She's going to be reading questions that you're going to be sending in, which you can start doing right now. Send those questions in the chat, and for more visibility, send a super chat. Moderators are watching the chat for your questions. They'll send them to us. We'll get to as many as we can. We've got a lot to cover today, including Vivek Ramaswamy sticks it to NBC and the rest of the media in a fantastic move during the recent Republican debate. CNN, the AP, and Reuters, well, they get called out for hiring actual terrorists as journalists. Yep, you heard that right. And Representative Claudia Tenney, who's been on our show a couple of times, pushes a defund movement. Well, I think you'll be able to get behind this one. We've got a lot to go for. Let's start with the pre-show poll. Pam, what is our poll question this week?
All right, poll question with nearly 400 folks who sat in queue today and participated. Which is your top priority? Securing the U.S. southern border? Defunding Jeanpierre? Sending aid to Ukraine, or never hearing Kamala laugh again?
Ooh, that's
Those are your
tough
four.
One.
Okay, what do you think?
I'm thinking it's never hearing Kamala laugh again.
Well, I think what happened with this when the audience decided to really take this seriously, securing the U.S. southern border.
That's probably more
at 88%.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's probably more honest and realistic.
Yes. So she took away the bulk of it. But number two, never hearing Kamala laugh again at 7% of the vote. So there you go. But anyway, pre-show poll, a lot of fun. Thanks for everybody participating.
And it was a pretty one-sided thing. Everybody thinks we really should get control of the border. Gee, what a novel idea.
Yes.
Our top comment from our last live stream, it's been a couple of weeks, but it's from Joseph Geis, who said, "I'm ashamed at all the creeps in our government. Term limits is a must. Go Trump." Joseph, I agree with you. I've been a big advocate for term limits since 1992. And we passed it in Arkansas back then until when I left the governorship, the legislators came in and nobody there to really fight it. And they got rid of a lot of the teeth of term limits, which had been pretty strict. I think it was a disaster. I still think term limits are a great idea, but for everyone, not just the state level, but the federal level. We ought to have term limits for members of Congress, the Senate. I would even go so far as to say term limits for people in the judiciary. I know that's a little more controversial, but when you give people jobs for life and they can't be fired except for the most outrageous reasons, you don't have much accountability. And nobody ought to get a federal or state paycheck indefinitely and then get a pension for it. Anyone in the government job should get Social Security, and that's it. Just my view, but with you 100% on term limits. Here's my question for you this week. Do you think the RNC, the Republican National Committee, has botched the entire debate process by giving the controls to the media instead of managing the debates themselves? Love to get your response to that. Leave your answers in the chat or in the comments section below. If you have not already done it, right now, hit that subscribe button, push the notification bell, and be sure to like and to share. We would like to get this to as many people as possible. That's how we do it. All right, we want to start with a look back at the Republican debate this past Wednesday night. It was not a stellar night. The ratings were dismal, the lowest by far viewership of a debate in years. And if you watched most of it or any of it, you probably could figure out why. It just didn't matter. But there were a couple of choice moments, this being maybe the most significant right out of the gate. Vivek Ramaswamy, his opening statement. Listen.
About you in the media and the corrupt media establishment, ask you the Trump-Russia collusion hoax that you pushed on this network for years. Was that real, or was that Hillary Clinton made up disinformation? Answer the question. Go.
Mr. Ross.
Sorry. This is how we get our country back. We need accountability.
Of course, they didn't answer it, because if they had answered it, they had to have been honest, and that couldn't have been on NBC. That was great. I love that he's just stuck it right in their face from the beginning, and it was a very special moment. Say what you want to about him, but he doesn't go out there on that stage and play it nice or play it safely, and they had it coming. That is for sure. Israel continues to be the big story across the globe, and this week is no different. This is going to be a shock to you, but I'm going to say something not just nice, but I'm going to give praise to Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania, the guy who likes to show up at work wearing junior high level clothing and sometimes makes no sense at all. But this week he actually made sense. He is taking a strong principled stand for the hostages and has plastered his entire office, as you can see in this footage here, with posters of every single hostage that Hamas has taken and continues to hold. It really was impressive that John Fetterman has taken such a strong stand. And interestingly, when he's had pushback from the far left, just goons, he didn't back down. He didn't say, oh, I'm sorry, I offended you. He said, look, we need to stand with the hostages. And he's been bold and clear. And I say, bravo, John Fetterman. Don't get used to it. I'm sure it won't last long, but I certainly wanted to give credit where credit is due. Controversy this week, some of the footage that was obtained of the very first moments of the attack against Israeli citizens by Hamas was shot by people who were working for the New York Times, for CNN, and Reuters. What we now know is that these are people who are supposed to be journalists, and they were actually with the terrorist at the time of some of the murders. Now, I don't know how you can call that journalism. It's one thing to objectively and distantly see things happen. It's another to ride on the back of a motorcycle with a terrorist and a group of terrorists as they're killing people and pretending that that's journalism. In one case, one of the people was actually holding a grenade in his hand, as you'll see in the video, while riding the motorcycle. I think we've got that. Let's see, is it? Okay, here we go. Let's watch that. This is supposedly the journalist who's using his hand and shaking it and pointing. That's a grenade in his hand. Now, that's not journalism. What journalist carries a grenade? That makes no sense at all. To their credit, CNN cut all ties with the person that they had put on as a freelancer. And to be fair, any of these networks, they don't necessarily hire these people or vet them carefully. Most of these people are what we call freelancers, and they're just contracted workers. But the fact that they didn't vet them any better than that is pretty remarkable. In fact, we have some footage of the vetting process, and this will show you how thorough a job they did in checking them out. There you go. You see that really very thorough touch. That ain't no TSA business there. They basically wave at them, put their hands around them like they're, just feeling in the thin air and checking out. My gosh, no wonder some of these people got through, and it's just utterly crazy. I don't even know how to even describe. But it's embarrassing to the news outlets that had contracted with these people and for whom they were actual participants. Benjamin Netanyahu, by the way, has called for their arrest and for them to be treated like Hamas terrorists because they were actually part of the killing of those Israelis and did nothing to stop it and did nothing to tell the Israelis that it was going on. We also have an issue that we want to talk about in that, you may think, well, America's really not involved in this. Oh, we actually are. There have been proxy forces of Iran that have attacked Americans over 40 times since October the 27th. At least 45 service members have been injured, many of them severely, by these attacks. And we have to ask the question, what are we doing to them? Well, that question was posed to John Kirby, the national security press person at the White House. Here was his answer.
On the Iranian proxies, why isn't the president's message of don't getting through that?
You'd have to talk to the proxies there. What I would tell you is that they continue to attack American troops and facilities at their own peril, and we will do what we need to do. The president will make decisions on his own terms and in his own way about better protecting those troops and facilities. That they continue to do this at their own peril.
I don't know what the peril is because we haven't seen any. we've really not done anything to those who have injured U.S. servicemen. So with all due respect to John Kirby, why don't you tell us what's going to happen to the people who did that to Americans? So far, not much. One more reminder, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, be sure and like and share. We need to get that out there so that more people can see our live stream and even know that it's there. And the only way you can do that is hit the subscribe button. We will notify you, tell you when we're coming up with another live stream. Let's go to Joe Biden. He once again has this moment when he's on the stage, he finishes his remarks and his particular reason for being somewhere, then he just wanders off, completely oblivious to what's going on around him. And you see him, he's finished, and he kind of looks around like, where do I go now? And he walks behind part of the set, and it almost looks like that the lady who is with him just stares off into space and like, where did he go? Now, this is what's interesting. That little blurb of color bars, that's what happened when the White House communications staff decided, we've lost the president, we don't know where he's gone, so they just cut the feed and go to the color bars. Pretty amazing, isn't it?
That's insane.
It is insane. By the way, it's interesting, Donald Trump now leads in 5 critical states. More voters than ever are beginning to feel that Joe Biden is just not up to the task. New York Times, it must kill them. I mean, it must be painful to them to admit this, but they had to publish the results of the poll, which was a New York Times Siena poll, finding that in the battleground states, voters trusted Donald Trump over President Biden on the economy, foreign policy, and immigration. And Mr. Biden's multiracial base is showing signs of fraying. Right now, Donald Trump leads among African-American men, and his support among Hispanics is growing dramatically. In the midst of all that, well, Kamala Harris has something very important to say. Let's listen.
The President and I obviously have a lot of work to do to earn our reelection, but I am confident we're going to win.
Well, she was half right. Don't know about how confident she is about winning, but when she said we're going to have to do a lot of things to earn your support, yep, I'd say that's true. And I would also say you're not doing a very good job of it right now. Let's see what you think. We want to go to some of your questions, and let's turn to Pam for those. What do you got?
Absolutely. Carol Webb asking this afternoon, Governor, do you think that Joe Manchin will run for president as an independent, and will that hurt or help Trump?
It won't hurt Trump. It will hurt Biden because everybody knows Joe is a Democrat. He has said he won't seek his Senate seat again. That was a smart move because he was going to lose. Jim Justice, who is the current governor, is overwhelmingly the favorite to win that Senate seat. Justice has already announced for that. Joe Manchin had been toying with the idea of running for president, but I think he realizes he can't do it as a Democrat. He is kind of flirting with this group called No Labels, which is almost like no chance is what they ought to call it. You know, there's always this idea, we just need a nonpartisan, look, it sounds so wonderful, it just doesn't work. And part of the reason it doesn't is because the two parties, whether you like them or not, have spent decades building a very systematic, methodical infrastructure to run elections, which means you have precinct level, county level, state level, national level, organized down to the street level, so you know where the voters are, and you can't just gin that up and create it unless you have billions of dollars, not millions, billions of dollars to do it. So that's why the whole idea of an independent candidacy, even when it's being run by somebody with as much money as Ross Perot had in 1992, find it is just a very difficult process. At best, you can be a spoiler. I just don't think it's realistic to actually get elected. So does Joe Manchin decide to run as an independent? He might. Maybe just for the message of it and for the fun of it. I don't know why he would do it. But if he does, it'll be far more detrimental to Joe Biden than it will to Donald Trump. Donald Trump's voters aren't going anywhere. They're not. By the way, I've had people ask me, when is your daughter going to endorse Donald Trump? Well, she did it this week. She was in Hialeah, Florida on Wednesday night and gave a wonderful speech in support of President Trump. I've told all my friends, I said, look, I can't tell you when it's going to happen. I'm not privy to that. but it is going to happen. It's never been an issue of if, it's always been an issue of when. And primarily, Sarah wanted to get through the legislative session, get her first year of governorship under her feet, and make the decision to go public with her endorsement of President Trump when it would perhaps have the most impact and do the most good. So she did it this week. I'm glad she did it. As again, I've never been the least bit doubtful that it was going to happen. And he was very happy about it. I was very happy about it. Sarah was very happy about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Speaking of Sarah, I got to mention this. This isn't even on our notes, but I saw it on Instagram this week where she posted, I was the first governor to kick China off our farmland, and Arkansas just received a check for $280,000 from the CCP-owned company that we kicked out to pay for the fine of violating the law. And she showed a picture of the check. So a little kudos to Sarah and what she's doing with that as well.
That was pretty cool.
Yes,
almost $300,000. And the reason the company had to pay, because there is a law that if you have an affiliation, you're part owned by the Communist Chinese Party, you can't buy that land. Well, they did it anyway and tried to hide it and be dishonest about it. They got caught and they had to pay. Yeah. So good for them.
Yes, absolutely. All right. A question from Judy Snell. What do you think about the results of the local elections from this past Tuesday?
There's a lot of talk that it was a big, huge, overwhelming win for Democrats, and on the surface it looked that way. There's a little more to it. Let me give an example. In Virginia, for example, Virginia did not flip the legislature, didn't go from Democrat to Republican. But Virginia is increasingly a blue state. It is not a purple state. It's blue. It's really more Democrat than Republican, and it is growing more that way because of so many federal employees who live in Northern Virginia. But here's something about Virginia that the mainstream media never reported. In districts where Joe Biden got 9% or less of a lead in 2020, every single one of the legislative seats in a Joe Biden district up to a 9-point Joe Biden lead flipped to Republican. Now, that's a big deal because they weren't close elections. It wasn't like a 1-point margin in 2020. These were counties where Joe Biden handily won in 2020, and those districts, every last one of them, went to the Republican. The other thing I've heard, particularly about the abortion law in Ohio, is that abortion is a terrible issue for Republicans. We need to quit being pro-life. It's hurting us. I totally disagree with that. Here's what is also not being told. So much money is being poured in from the left to enshrine abortion in states like Ohio. And the Republicans have not done a good job. First of all, we don't have the money to match it. But even if we did, the way we're messaging it is all messed up. We're arguing among ourselves, should it be a 6-week ban, a 12-week ban, a 15-week? That's confusing to a lot of people, and that makes it hard. We are on the defensive. We ought to be on the offensive. We ought to be pushing back to Democrats who think that you could have an abortion up until the moment of birth. And we ought to demand that they tell us what their limitations are. The truth is, they don't have any. And then if we're going to pick a time to say that you can't do an abortion after a time, I think it's conception, but I realize that's not probably politically doable. But that would be my choice. Use the heartbeat. The heartbeat bill, which was in Ohio, makes more sense because it's not nebulous to say 6 weeks, 15 weeks, 21 weeks. People get confused. Say, look, if the end of a heartbeat means you're dead, then the presence of a heartbeat means you're alive. That's not hard to figure out. That's where I think we should be going with this more so.
So we asked a poll question today, which was your priority, ask our audience viewing this afternoon, and securing the southern border led the way. Brad Brune with the super chat today said, difficult poll question, securing the border is most important, but not hearing Kamala laugh again, also very important.
See, Brad and I are thinking alike there. We both had that same view that, yeah, substantively it's the border, but just from a personal perspective, just not hearing her laugh would be wonderful.
We can only take so much.
Absolutely.
So Mitchell Ryan also with a super chat question, how do you think the SEC will vote on the Equality for the Internet initiative? It is part one of that infrastructure law. Can it be stopped?
My honest answer, Mitchell, is I don't know. I just don't. I'm not keeping up with that as much. It's going to be a long, protracted process for them to deal with that because it's going to be rife with a lot of controversy and special interests pulling it. I do not have a what I would call an informed perspective of how that's going to turn out. Wish I could tell you I did, but I don't. I do know this. If you don't subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell, you're going to miss a live stream one of these days, and you don't want to do that. Be sure to like and share. That's important to us.
All right, David W. asking, who will be Trump's VP? Everybody's talking about that.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of time to decide that. He probably won't make that decision until we're finished with the primaries and he's secured the nomination. That could be sometime in the late spring, early summer. There's no reason for him to rush that. Not going to affect the support he has. It's not like people are going to wait and see who he picks as to whether they're going to support him. They're already supporting him by large numbers. So I'd say that'd be an issue I'd just not worry about until late spring, early summer.
Carol is asking today, Governor, can you mention the cowboy who went to Israel to help the farmers?
I saw that on the internet. I didn't have a lot of understanding about it other than there was a guy, he's from Texas, and he's a cowboy, and he was going to Israel at his own expense. He's not a Jew. He's going over there to help Israeli farmers and to just be helpful to them. And I thought it was an extraordinary perspective. We need to get to this. The Biden administration continues to say they're just doing a great job on immigration. And you know, there are some people who agree with them doing a great job. You know who they are? Watch this, you'll see. Bunch of young families. All those are young males who look like they could be military age, and they're the ones who are screaming Biden. By the way, those are people on the other side of the border ready to walk right in because they know they can, and they're going to. And they'll join the ranks of all of us, and we have no idea why they're coming. That's who's excited about Joe Biden and his border policy. Jeanpierre, or is the local talk show host, Dan Mantis,
yes.
Dan Mantis from local radio station, Talk Radio, calls her Cringe Jeanpierre. I love that. I always want to give credit to Dan Mantis for that because it's a brilliant depiction. But here's her answer when she's asked about who really is controlling the border.
You know, on day one, the president put forward a comprehensive immigration plan, legislation for Congress to take a serious look at and to work with him on getting that done. We have a broken immigration system. It's been broken for decades now, and the president has done everything that he can on his own to try to figure out how do we deal with what's going on at the border.
He's done everything he can to mess it up. That's what he's done. We were well on our way to control of the border when Donald Trump was president. We just were. Joe Biden came in, and on day one, literally day one, the day of his swearing in, he signed executive orders reversing every single Trump policy, and it has been a disaster ever since. You know who doesn't think it's a disaster? Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas. He's got to be one of the dumbest people ever to get a federal paycheck. He's sitting before Congress. Here is his answer when he's asked, is our border situation a disaster?
So the situation at the border, you're saying, is not a disaster?
That is correct.
That is not correct, Mr. Mayorkas. It is a disaster, and everybody but you seems to understand that. It's also interesting that when he's asked about the whole idea of how we're going to secure it, he pretends that it's just going fine. Watch.
The administration has pursued a comprehensive strategy to manage this unprecedented migration. Our strategy includes expanded lawful pathways for migration, strengthened consequences for unlawful entry at the border, removing a record number of individuals found to be ineligible for protection under the law, and increased partnership across the region to curb irregular migration.
You just wonder who wrote that for him. He didn't read it convincingly because I'm not sure he'd ever seen it before he read it in the halls of Congress. But what a load for him to pretend that, yeah, we've got a comprehensive policy. It's a disaster. And even Democrats in states like New York are saying it's a disaster. But everybody knows it except this guy, who ought to be impeached, but he should have never been hired in the first place. Let's take a couple of questions.
Sure. Trudy is asking today, good afternoon, Governor. I just wanted to know, can the House Speaker fire anyone?
His own staff, that's basically it. The House Speaker can't fire other people who work for other members of the House, only those that were under his direct supervision.
Okay. Brad would like to know, does it not seem that the current administration is acting as if they support Israel while at the same time handcuffing Israel and not letting them do what should be done?
In the earliest days, I have to give credit to both Secretary Blinken and Joe Biden for giving just strong, unequivocal support to Israel. Within the last week, they've started teetering, as Margaret Thatcher once said to George Walker Bush, Bush 41, don't go wobbly on us, George. And I'm thinking they're going a little wobbly. By them calling for these pauses and trying to urge for, they say it's not a ceasefire, this was just be a pause. But look, trying to tell Israel anything right now is inappropriate. The only thing we should tell Israel is do what you got to do to get rid of Hamas. They were vicious, they slaughtered your people. I don't mean they just killed them, they slaughtered them. And they did it not only unmercifully, but they did it to inflict the most amount of pain, both physically and emotionally, on the Israeli people as was humanly possible. And then in the midst of doing it, they did it with gleeful joy. They called their parents back in Gaza and celebrated with them the fact that they had murdered Jews and were saying, Father, today I fulfill my greatest destiny. I murdered 10 Jews. Please put Mother on the phone and let me tell her of how many Jews I killed. What kind of people would do that? That's disgusting and just utterly sick. Another topic, don't want to miss this, because in the midst of all the things going on in the Middle East, there's still the ongoing investigations of the House Oversight Committee headed by James Comer, and they've now issued subpoenas for Hunter Biden, James Biden, and Biden family business associate Rob Walker. That question was put to Karine Jeanpierre at the White House as to what she thinks of it. Her answer is just astounding. Watch, and then I'll share what I mean by that.
Oversight Committee has issued subpoenas for Hunter Biden, James Biden, and Biden family business associate Rob Walker. Do you have a comment on that?
So look, as you just mentioned, it's just breaking, so I don't have this information in front of me. I'm just hearing from you.
I'm just hearing from you. What she says is there was zero evidence. No, Karine, there actually are thousands of pieces of evidence. I don't expect that you would have seen any of them or acknowledged that they were there. There's lots of evidence. That's why they continue with these hearings. That's why they have the bank records. That's why they've produced the bank records and shown us copies of the bank records. Most places we would call that something evidence. But you wouldn't do it at the White House because you're blind to it, oblivious. She's done such a poor job that Claudia Tenney, Congresswoman from New York, who's been on our show a couple of times, very sharp Congresswoman, made a proposal this week in Congress. I think it's kind of interesting. I want you to watch and see, do you agree with Congressman Tenney's proposal on dealing with the salary for Karine Jeanpierre?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to offer an amendment to reduce the salary of Karine Jeanpierre, the White House press secretary, to $1. Mr. Speaker, during Ms. Jeanpierre's tenure as press secretary, she has repeatedly lied to the American people and acted in a condescending manner toward reporters and also violated the Hatch Act.
There you go. That's pretty good. Defund her down to $1.
Yeah. Wonder how she took that.
Zero evidence that I've done anything wrong. That's probably how she took it.
Yeah.
Well, we're glad you have joined us. We want you to be sure to leave your comments and your thoughts right there in the chat. We'll continue to monitor it even after we're off our live stream today. Be sure to subscribe, hit the like button, click that notification bell. And don't forget, we'll be live with Mike every Friday. Unless we tell you otherwise, that's all the more reason to hit the notification bell.